Pete, how you doing? That's good. Glad to know. Let's get right to the point. This is so crazy that Mrballen uploaded this video. Dead girl comes back to life. Recently, I've been looking up stuff. We're gonna start the video. Hey, I've been curious. I've been watching videos like what happens when you die and come back. What do you see? Same thing happened with my mom. I wanted to ask her so bad, but we know what happened, whatever. So it's this video that's been kind of floating around, whatever. I don't know if y'all seen it. I've seen it like on TikTok, Facebook, IG. I've seen it everywhere. But it's like this, like a little black teenage dude. He's in a doctor. I think he like died and came back a few times from like perks or something. I don't remember exactly. Correct me if I'm wrong, whatever. But I be watching those videos, man, and I was like, because I'm curious. At the end of the day, I think a lot of us don't know your beliefs, not here to judge your beliefs. But I just wonder, like, do you legit go on and it's like that's it to a whole better place and that's the end, or is it really life after death, reincarnation? That is so scary to me. We'll talk about it more at the end. I'm gonna tell you why I do not want that. You may get a little offended. We'll talk at the end. We'll check out the video. Link will be in the description below. But let's go.
Today's story is the definition of creepy. It starts somewhat normally, but then slowly spirals into absolute insanity. It is definitely one you will remember. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please go into the like button's fridge and dump out their 2-liter of Coke, and then refill the bottle with flat root beer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Before we get into today's story, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, HelloFresh. The primary reason my diet periodically turns into Diet Cheeto smoothies and deep...
I don't even drink pop, but it's called pop where I'm from. But flat root beer is the worst thing you could ever drink. That and flat cream soda. I don't know if y'all ever had cream soda. It's the worst kind of flat pop you could ever drink.
So if you're finally ready to put down those chocolate-covered pickles, then you need to sign up for HelloFresh today. To do that, go to HelloFresh.com and use code Mrballen16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts. Okay, let's get into today's story.
I wonder if that'd be good though, low-key. Oh. I ain't gonna cap, a chocolate covered pickle might slap.
In 1889, when Karl Tanzler was just 12 years old and living with his family in Dresden, Germany, he had a very strange dream. In this dream, he found himself in this black void where everywhere he looked, it was just nothingness. And then behind him, he heard footsteps. And so he whips himself around and he looks, and there's this woman dressed in this big, puffy, elegant white dress walking towards him out of the darkness. And when she walks right up in front of him, she comes to a stop and she introduces herself as Anna Constantia von Brockdorf, who was a real person in the early 1700s. She was a noblewoman in Germany, and she would tell Karl that she is actually a distant relative of his, and that she was here to pass on a very important message. Karl was rooted to the spot. He didn't know if he should be afraid of what she was going to say, or excited or nervous, but before he could decide, Anna had already turned and was pointing in the direction she had appeared out of. And so Karl turns and looks in the direction she was pointing, and out of this blackness, out of this void, came this woman's face. It was a face detached from a body. It almost looked like a floating picture of a woman's face. And as this face floated closer and closer to them, Karl was immediately struck by just how beautiful this woman was. Her hair was jet black like a raven's feathers, and her skin was white like porcelain. But there was something off about this woman, this floating face. She looked sad and kind of frail. And so as Karl found himself staring at this face, which was now right next to them, Anna spoke to him again, and she would tell Karl that this woman, the floating face, she's going to appear in your life later on, and it is your mission given by God to save her. She's going to be very ill, very sick, and you need to find a way to keep her alive.
Damn.
Then Karl, in real life, woke up, and immediately he was struck by just how visceral that dream had been. It really felt like that had just happened to him, but after a few moments, it seemed like, okay, that was just a dream.
Like, bro,
but
what the
unlike
hell?
other visceral dreams he had had in the past, this one did not gradually fade from his memory. Instead, over the course of that day, the memory specifically of the raven-haired woman's face really seemed to become more clear and more concrete in his mind, to the point where at the end of that day, he could easily remember exactly what she looked like. Over the following days and months and years, Carl periodically would have this same dream, this same vision of his distant relative Anna, who would come out of the void, and she would remind him to be on the lookout for this raven-haired woman when God sent her to him. But despite these constant reminders in his dreams, and Carl being ever vigilant to look for this raven-haired woman in real life, he never actually found her. He never met this woman he was supposed to.
See, but I don't think it's gonna work like that. I think it's just gonna be like, life gonna happen, you gonna bump into her. My bad, I had to resync my camera and everything real quick. Hold up. But peep though, thinking about it, if you keep having this dream and this person is telling you, this relative that you know is telling like, yo, you need to save this person when you meet him. Honestly, like, would you do it? Like, be 100% honest. Like, you keep having this dream over and over and over. The reason why I feel like I would, because I feel like the dream world is, we gonna have that talk, it's gonna sound weird, that is some way of connection to a parallel universe. Maybe that's the real life. Don't know. We're not gonna get too deep into it. So I would feel like, since when I'm in dreamland, I feel limitless anyway. I don't know about you, I feel limitless anyway. So I would feel like that's a higher version of me versus me here that's just a piece of shit. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna listen, because I feel like that one knows something. Let me do what that one's telling me. Let me do what that version of me is telling me to do. My bad, I was just sitting here thinking about this more.
Haired woman in real life, he never actually found her. He never met this woman he was supposed to save. Fast forward to 1926, Carl was 39 years old. By this point, he had gotten married, not to the raven-haired woman, but instead to a local woman in Dresden. And the pair had had 2 daughters together, and they lived a simple life. And, you know, by and large, Carl seemed rather content and happy with his life. However, secretly, he was a little disappointed that these dreams, these visions that he was having of Anna and the raven-haired woman, that they had not come true, that it really had just been a dream. That year, due to an economic downturn in Germany, Carl and his family left Germany and emigrated to the United States, where they believed there would be better opportunities for them. And when they arrived in the United States, they settled in Central Florida, but within a year, Carl and his wife had a severe falling out and they split up. And so Carl would leave the family home in Central Florida, and he would resettle several hundred miles south in Southern Florida in a town called Key West. And it would be in Key West that Carl would get a job as an X-ray technician at a local hospital, and it would also be in Key West that Carl's life would change forever. Less than a year after settling in Key West, Carl was at the hospital going about his day when an older woman walked into the office, and she said to Carl that she was there to get her daughter, her 21-year-old daughter, an X-ray of her chest, because her daughter apparently couldn't stop coughing and they were concerned about it. And so Carl began doing the paperwork with the mother when suddenly the daughter came into the office. And as soon as Carl saw her, he knew immediately that she was the raven-haired woman from his dreams. She walked in and she sat down in a chair, and Carl just stopped what he was doing and stared at the daughter. And then he kind of broke out of it and turned his attention back to the mother, and he said to her, "Ma'am, don't worry. I will do everything in my power to save your daughter's life." Now, the mother didn't know what was wrong with her daughter, and so this was both really helpful that this man she was talking to was so willing to help.
See, but you gotta be careful. At the same time, if she think you cool, she's like, boy, I don't know. So be careful, because don't drop the bag.
Or to save your daughter's life. Now, the mother didn't know what was wrong with her daughter, and so this was both really helpful that this man she was talking to was so willing to help, and also kind of ominous that he was already insinuating that she could be dying. But either way, the mother said, "Thank you very much, we really appreciate that." And so Carl and the mother, they finished their paperwork, and then Carl quickly left from behind his desk and hustled over to the daughter, and he introduced himself and he reiterated that she was in good hands. And the daughter was a little bit weirded out by this, but she was polite and said thank thank you, and she said her name was Elena. And so Carl would take Elena and bring her back and give her the x-ray, and unfortunately he would discover through this x-ray that she had tuberculosis. Today, that disease is easily curable, but at the time, that was a death sentence. When Carl saw this, though, in a weird way, it almost made him happy, because this was another indication that, this really was the raven-haired woman from his dream.
So
Not only did she look the part, but she also had arrived in desperate need of help. And so now Carl needed to find a way to save her, even though he was just an x-ray technician. He was not a doctor, and so he had no clue how to begin to treat tuberculosis. But that didn't stop Carl. Over the next year, Carl would be in touch with Elena and her family on a near daily basis, updating them on all of the new techniques to fight tuberculosis that he was doing all this research on, and he would tell them about experimental procedures and drugs they could try, even sometimes paying out of pocket for them to go try them. He would also bring Elena into the office as often as he possibly could to x-ray her again and again and again to see if perhaps she was making good progress. But unfortunately, over the course of that year where he was doing everything he could, it just didn't work. The disease ravaged Elena's body, and on October 31st, 1931, so roughly a year after Carl had first met Elena, Elena would unfortunately pass away. Elena's family was devastated by this, but their grief didn't even compare to Carl's grief. It was like Carl had lost his life too. He couldn't
Man, I'll be scared to go to sleep because she gonna whoop my ass when I go to Dream World, boy. She's like, did you save her? I'm like, huh?
Unfortunately pass away. Elena's family was devastated by this, but their grief didn't even compare to Carl's grief. It was like Carl had lost his life too. He couldn't believe he had failed his mission and let the raven-haired woman die. When it came time to bury Elena, Carl said, "Let me pay for the most elaborate gravesite we can possibly make. Let me set up a mausoleum for her." A mausoleum is an external building that sits in a cemetery that effectively serves as a kind of shrine to the deceased. And so her family, they understood that Carl had become very, very close with Elena, although they didn't fully understand the relationship, but they did understand she meant a lot to him, and so they agreed to let him do this. After Elena was buried inside of this small temple that Carl had built for her, Carl began spending virtually all of his time kneeling inside of it, crying and begging for Elena's forgiveness. Elena's family was well aware that Carl was doing this, and at first they kind of just let it happen, but after several months, they began to tell Carl, you really need to let her go. You need to begin to move on. But Carl refused. In fact, over time, he only became more and more obsessed.
Hold on. Because at that point, when they put you one of those, that's legit like a casket, right? Meaning the funeral already happened, meaning you've already been to the morgue, right? I thought the story was going to be more of like she choked, whatever, boom, boom, brought her back to life type of shit. Not saying it was going to be that basic, but you know what I mean. I thought it was like in an instant, brought her back, and then something kept going, like something crazy though. But at this point, how could you? I'm gonna let the story finish so I can get the answer, but how?
On, but Carl refused. In fact, over time, he only became more and more obsessed with Elena. Finally, after 7 years of Carl doing this, Elena's family decided, enough is enough. He really needs to stop making her loss all about him. It's not his loss, it's our loss. We're her family. And so the family decided the only way to kind of get Carl to stop doing what he was doing is to demand he give the key back that gave him access into the small area inside of the mausoleum. So one night, Elena's sister, whose name was Florinda, decided to go over to Carl's house unannounced and confront him and get the key back from him. And so she hopped in her car and she drove over to his property. His house was kind of set back off the road behind some trees, and so you had to drive down this kind of winding driveway to get to it. And so Florinda turned onto his driveway and she began driving, and when his house came into view, the first thing she noticed was a number of the windows on the first floor were all lit up. Clearly, Carl was home, and as she's driving towards the house, she's just looking in these windows, and for a second, she sees Carl, and he's very elegantly dressed in a suit or a tuxedo, and he's ballroom dancing with this woman who's also very elegantly dressed as well. And for a second, Florinda considered turning around and not disturbing him, but then she thought, you know what, this has been going on for so long, I just need to get this over with. And so she drove her car and stopped in front of Carl's house. She hopped out, she walked up onto his porch, and she knocked on his front door. Inside, she could hear where music was clearly playing, but just a few seconds after she had knocked, the music was cut off, and then no one came to the door. And so Florinda knows there's people inside this house, and so she knocks again, but again, there's no movement in the house. It's just silent, as if the people inside are pretending.
He ain't say shit. Boy in there dancing with a dead body, I bet. Calm down.
And there's no movement in the house. It's just silent, as if the people inside are pretending not to be there. And so finally, frustrated, Florinda knocks on the door a third time and says, "Carl, I know you're in there. I have to talk to you about my sister. Please come out here." And so finally, she heard the shuffling of feet, and then she heard the sound of the door unlocking, and it opened up just a crack. And through this crack, Carl looked through, and he looked out at Florinda very suspiciously. And he said to her, "What do you want?" And Florinda would say, "Look, I'm here to talk to you about my sister. Can I please come inside for a second, or can you come out here and talk to me?" But Carl pretty much immediately said no, and then he shut the door. However, before he shut the door, Carl had very briefly stepped out of the way, allowing Florinda to see through that gap into the house. So before the door actually shut, she got to see who and what was inside that house. And what she saw was the woman Carl had been dancing with, and the woman was seated in a chair maybe halfway through the house, and she was facing the door. And Florinda knew immediately it was her sister. And so she's standing on the porch having no idea what to make of what she's just...
I didn't see it, but like, all right, bye. Get back to the car, because you know he crazy. Oh my gosh. Whole time I'm thinking like, man, this bro, hey, he fired. You saw like they showed a little picture. He's up working late in the office, whatever he was doing. I'm thinking like, yeah, he about to be on some Dr. CB-ish or whatever he about to do.
Was her sister. And so she's standing on the porch having no idea what to make of what she's just discovered. And so feeling kind of overwhelmed, she just kind of staggered off the front porch. She turned around, she ran into her car, and she drove off to tell the police. When the police came back, they knocked on the front door and they demanded that Carl let them see the woman he was there with. And so at this point, Carl knew the gig was up, and so he opened the door and he allowed them to come inside. And when the police went inside, they saw the woman he was with, and sure enough, it was Elena. However, Elena was deceased and had been for 7 years. After her death, Carl said he was able to talk to her inside of her mausoleum. And so that was why he was going back there every single night, because he and Elena were spending time together. And then at some point in 1933, so 2 years after Elena has been dead and buried, Carl would say she told him while he was visiting her mausoleum that she didn't like being in the mausoleum and that she wanted to come back with him and stay at his house. And so the following day, Carl had shown up with a child's wagon, and he pulled her out of her coffin, pulled her out of the mausoleum, put her corpse in this wagon, and wheeled her back to his house. He had continued to go to the mausoleum every night for the next 5 years just to keep up appearances, but Elena's body never went back inside of it. She would stay at his house, where he painstakingly attempted to restore Elena's very badly decomposed body to its original form. He strung piano wire through her entire body, connecting all of her bones together to keep her skeleton intact. He replaced her eyes with glass eyes, and he began rubbing the special wax all over her skin. He also stuffed her insides full of rags in order to give her a full, natural look, and he constantly sprayed her with perfume to reduce the smell. Once she was, in his eyes, back to normal, he began spending as much time with her as he possibly could. He would change her outfits constantly, he would put on makeup, and he would give her new jewelry, and he would talk to her about the ups and downs of life. He would laugh with her, he would cry with her, he would sleep with her. Carl would admit that ultimately his goal with keeping Elena in his home was to eventually still save her life. He believed if he could somehow get her body up into the stratosphere, that the radiation up there would bring her back to life. And if he could do that, he would be fulfilling his God-given mission to protect her. But Carl never got a chance to launch her into the stratosphere.
Boy, hell no, you never get a chance. Boy. At first, I was like, yeah, bro, he about to do this. He about to say this poor little girl. But the whole time, I'm calling drugs. Stop playing with me. And low-key, I want to know how the rest of the dream go. I'm at this point, the story got me. I'm like, but did you dream again? What did she say? Was she upset? Nigga, tell me something. I mean, this could be a good Stephen King book. I'm just saying. But this, you had a good story going. Keep it up. What happened next? Did anybody know what part 2?
Up there would bring her back to life. And if he could do that, he would be fulfilling his God-given mission to protect her. But Carl never got a chance to launch her into the stratosphere. Instead, he was charged with wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. However, these charges would be dropped and Carl would be set free. As for Elena, her body was returned to her family and they would bury her in Key West. So that's going to do it, guys. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already, please go into the like button's fridge and dump out their 2-liter of Coke and then refill the bottle with flat root beer. Also, please subscribe.
Hey, but overall, I will say this. This video was fire. I liked it. The twist really got me because it went totally different direction than what I thought, though. Hey, but like I said, it wasn't taught. Life after death, the reincarnation. At this point, video done. You can leave if you want. I'm just about to do a little talking. And keep in mind, it's just how I think. Things I think about. You think how you think. Your beliefs are your beliefs. I'm not here to judge you on yours. I'm not here to change your mind on nothing. This is just taking you into my world of how I look at ish. Peep, dog. Speaking of my mom's death, whatever, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, what do you see when you go? Like, is it legit pure black? Do you legit make it on to this place where everything is good or everything is bad? Not trying to trigger people. I'm not saying names and stuff. Boom, you get it. So if that, or do you actually reincarnate? Do you come back into someone else? Let's say if that's the case. I've heard that all my life. That's what happened. The reason why that's scary to me, because all right, let's say if that's the case, that will mean back in the year 1542. I was nowhere near here, right? But by going off of life after death and reincarnating, I had to exist somewhere then, right? So therefore, that would mean I was in someone, lived, died, when someone else lived, died, boom, boom, did that all the way up until I got to this body, and it's just going to keep on happening. So I was like, if that's the case, though, the reason why that's scary, it will be beautiful, but you got to look at both sides. There's a yin and a yang. I was like, that would be beautiful if that's the case. Because at least I can come back and do it again, live again. I probably won't remember nothing, but hey, I keep doing that. That could be the case. Who knows? But if that's the case, though, that would mean I would never, ever get to see that part. You see where let's say if I make it to the end and everything is good, I make it up there. I get to meet my mom again, stuff like that. That will never happen. The reason why is because, keeping it 100, wouldn't that mean I've lived in someone's body, died, lived in someone's body, died, boom, 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 boom. Meaning I've had many moms. So meaning by the time I finally get there, it's not going to be this one that I got a picture of right now. She'll be there because I was in this one, but what about all those other ones that was before that? Wouldn't I have like 100 damn moms up there? Look, I just don't know. And for me, it always goes back to that quote. You've been dead longer than you've been alive. I mentioned the year 1400, 1300, whatever. That's a long time before I got here. Damn, only if I can remember what was I doing. Did I really reincarnate? Was I really in heaven? Stuff like that. It's just, man, I don't know, it's weird. Hey, you can educate me on anything you want. I'm always open ears to listen. At the end of the day, I got my opinion, you got your opinion. Enjoy your day, night, evening, whatever. But I'm out.